On April 5, 2025, in the small city of Pocatello, Idaho, a 911 call was placed. It wasn't the first time the police had been called to that address, but it would be the last time anyone saw 17-year-old Victor Perez alive. Victor was nonverbal, diagnosed with autism and cerebral palsy. According to his family, he was in the middle of a mental health crisis. His condition made communication difficult. When overwhelmed, Victor often shut down or lashed out in confusion. He had no criminal history, no violent past, just a long history of needing care, patience, and understanding. The call was made by Victor's mother. She told dispatch that he had a knife, but he wasn't threatening anyone. She was afraid he might hurt himself more than anyone else. The family hoped for help, not violence. When officers arrived, Victor was in his front yard, holding a kitchen knife. There was a chain-link fence between him and the officers. Family members were yelling from the porch, "He's not trying to hurt anyone. He's just scared. Drop the knife. Do it now." Victor didn't respond, not because he was resisting, but because he didn't understand. His mother shouted his name, trying to calm him, but the tension was rising. The officers kept yelling. Victor took a single step forward, and in less than 2 seconds, they opened fire. 9 shots, echoing through the neighborhood. Neighbors would later say it sounded like fireworks until they heard the screams. Victor was hit in the torso, legs, and shoulder. He collapsed instantly. Officers called for an ambulance and began basic aid. His mother, hysterical, tried to reach him but was held back. He was rushed to Port Neuf Medical Center. He lost a leg, underwent multiple surgeries, was kept on life support for a week. His brain had suffered massive oxygen loss. He never regained consciousness. And on April 12, 2025, Victor Perez was taken off life support. He was just 17, a teenager, gone in seconds after a call for help. There were no negotiations, no tactical retreat, just shouted commands and a wall of fear. Victor's mother said they didn't see his diagnosis. They didn't see his struggle. They saw a brown boy with a knife. That wasn't protection. That was panic. And in that panic, they forgot to protect. Neighbors set up a small memorial by the sidewalk. Balloons, candles, a teddy bear, a note that read, "We're sorry." His little cousin laid a flower and whispered, "I hope you're not scared anymore." Word spread fast, not just in Pocatello, but across the entire state. A 17-year-old boy, autistic, unarmed, according to some witnesses, shot 9 times. His story was on every local news channel. Social media exploded with outrage. Hashtags like #Justice for Victor and #Pocatello. Shooting began trending regionally within 24 hours. That weekend, hundreds gathered. Mothers, fathers, students, teachers. They held candles, marched to the courthouse. Some brought flowers. Others carried signs that read, "He needed help, not bullets," and "Train cops, not guns." Chants echoed in the cold spring air. Say his name. Victor Perez. Local clergy offered prayers. Mental health advocates called for change. Classmates from Victor's high school spoke tearfully about a boy they said was quiet, kind, and full of heart. Mayor Brian Blad and Police Chief Roger Shai addressed the public. They called it a tragedy. They offered condolences, but they didn't answer questions, citing an open investigation. That silence only fueled the fire. A civil rights law firm representing Victor's family stepped forward. They announced a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Pocatello, alleging excessive force, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and a complete failure to de-escalate. The lawsuit demanded 3 things: accountability, training reform, transparency in all use of force cases involving disabled individuals. Teachers, social workers, and even former officers voiced concern. They said Victor's death was part of a larger pattern, where law enforcement is trained to react, but not to understand. One retired crisis negotiator said, "This wasn't policing, this was panic." Victor was set up to fail the moment they shouted instead of listened. For the first time in Pocatello's recent history, the community stood united, not just in grief, but in resistance. Regional leaders took notice, and national civil rights groups began watching closely. Victor's photo was printed on T-shirts, posters, and murals. One high school art class painted a tribute wall that read, "Different, not dangerous." Local churches organized town halls. Doctors explained the signs of sensory overload. Autism specialists volunteered to train officers for free. Meanwhile, activists demanded the release of full bodycam footage. They submitted FOIA requests, campaigned for independent review boards, collected over 50,000 petition signatures in under 2 weeks. The pressure grew, not just on the city, but on the state. Idaho's Attorney General was asked to intervene. Victor's story had gone national, and for the first time, it felt like Pocatello wasn't just mourning a boy, it was standing up for one. Victor Perez wasn't a threat. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was a scared teenager in the middle of a meltdown. So how did a call for help turn into a fatal shooting? That's the question still being asked by his family, by his teachers, and by millions who watched the footage online. Victor's mother said in a public statement, "I called for help because I was afraid for him, not afraid of him. They didn't see my son. They saw a threat." His sister wrote, "Victor didn't deserve to die. He deserved understanding, patience, and love. He was more than his condition. He was a person. My brother." During a protest, one speaker shouted into a megaphone, "Victor's life mattered. His life mattered just as much as yours or mine." In the weeks that followed, the city held community meetings. Some were tense, others emotional, and a few hopeful. New proposals were introduced, like crisis intervention teams, mandatory de-escalation training, and pairing social workers with officers on wellness checks. The mayor's office confirmed they would review Pocatello PD's internal training protocols. A local advocacy group began distributing flyers titled, "Policing with Compassion." Victor's family didn't want vengeance. They wanted change. They wanted a world where officers are trained to recognize autism, not treat it like aggression. His mother said, "If this happened to Victor, it can happen to anyone's child. We don't want another headline. We want reform. We want justice. We want to feel safe calling 911 again." Victor's death became more than a headline. It became a movement, a wake-up call about the limits of force and the need for compassion in crisis. Because when you strip away the uniforms, the courtrooms, and the statements, what's left is a boy who needed help and never got it. Justice for Victor. He should have been helped, not killed. Reform now. In local art galleries, Victor's image now hangs, a mural painted by teens he never met, his smile captured in vivid strokes. Underneath it reads, "You deserved better." Schools across Idaho began workshops on interacting with students on the autism spectrum. His name came up in classrooms, not just as a tragedy, but as a catalyst. The state's mental health board launched new grant funding for first responder crisis training. A bill named Victor's Law was introduced in committee, still waiting for a vote. And yet, in his mother's home, his room remains untouched. Video games still plugged in, posters still hanging, a jacket still draped over his chair. She visits it each night, sits quietly, sometimes speaking aloud, sometimes not. "They took you," she whispers, "but they didn't take your voice. We speak it now." Despite mounting pressure, the Pocatello Police Department refused to release additional footage or radio logs. Their official statement remained unchanged. Officers feared for their safety, but critics pointed out glaring inconsistencies. Why were body cams disabled at key moments? Why was the footage released so heavily edited? When pressed by journalists, city officials cited ongoing investigations. Victor's family said it felt like a cover-up. Community leaders demanded answers. Why is transparency optional when a child dies? One activist asked during a televised forum. Weeks turned into months, and still, no apology, no disciplinary action, no policy change. Inside council chambers, parents cried. Former officers spoke anonymously about a culture of silence. One said, "They don't correct mistakes, they bury them." And so the community watched as their trust eroded, piece by piece. Victor's name became more than a memory. It became a test of whether a system built on force could ever be reshaped by justice. Victor's name echoes through the streets of Pocatello, a symbol of pain, of protest, and of the need for change.